Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for tuning in to our show tonight. Each week, I try to spotlight people who are doing good in fantasy football. There are so many people doing either charity leagues or other types of charity events. The purpose of this show is to highlight that and to try to encourage people to either get more involved by joining the leagues and events or maybe even starting up their own charity league and charity event. Our show tonight spotlights one of the people that are doing perhaps one of the longest running charity leagues that I'm aware of. And tonight's special guest is Murf of 5 Yard Rush. He's the co author of the Fantasy Football Playbook. He's the co host of All Around Fantasy Football Podcast. And most important, the focus of tonight's show, he's the organizer of the Fantasy Football Challenge Cup Charity League, and that's supporting Crohn's and Colitis UK. So, hi, Murf, and welcome to the Give Back Show.
Mate, pleasure to be here. Great introduction. Yeah, it's you say that and you think, oh wow, how long have I been doing bits and pieces? Yeah, it's been a great sort of 8 years in the fantasy space, writing for some of the great publications out there like Fantasy Pros and doing great work. And then the podcast and everything. It's amazing. It makes you kind of think, like, I always feel like I'm quite new to this, but actually I don't think I am. I think I'm one of the elder statesmen of the fantasy football community, it feels like at times.
Well, and in fact, what we're going to do is we'll talk more about both the Fantasy Football Challenge Cup and the charity that you support. But I think to begin, let's go ahead and learn a little bit more about you as a person, and then we'll get into the charity league. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, I'm guessing I'm hearing a little bit of a Southern accent, perhaps. So I'm guessing you're from South London? No, why don't you tell me where you're from?
I actually don't have an accent. I know it's weird to Americans listening to this because it's clearly English and it is, but I've kind of been all over. So I actually live 70 miles north of London, in a place which no one's ever heard of. So I guess I'm kind of like 30 minutes from Milton Keynes, about 45 minutes from Birmingham, and about 30 minutes from 40 minutes from Cambridge. So I'm kind of like south of the middle of the country, I think is what it is. But we're not a big country. That, in the US, that would be quite impressive. Over here, like 70 miles north of London is kind of where I am. But I did grow up in North London, South London. I also lived in Orlando for nearly 6 years at the turn of the century. So that's I don't really have an accent because I've kind of lived all over in a lot of different places. So it's just English, and that's kind of what it is now.
Nice. And again, how did you get into, or how did you start following American football?
Yeah, so kind of watched a little bit. So story of football over here in the UK is the 80s was the first time that American games were televised. You really only saw the 49ers and the Bears. They were kind of the only, and the Dolphins, sorry, they were kind of the only teams that were kind of on telly, more the 49ers and the Dolphins. So if you speak to people who remember the 80s quite well, that's why there's a huge 49er contingent and a huge Miami Dolphin contingent over here in the UK. In the 90s, they expanded it a little bit more for a few teams, and there were more, but it was less live games and more sort of the highlight packages. So I was a little bit aware, but I wouldn't say I was a fan. In the year 2000, I moved to Orlando. So I was 14 at the time. So people can now try and work out how I'm going to be. I went to high school and started getting into football and fantasy football. And that's pretty much how I got into it, was through fantasy football. And watching the Buccaneers, and it was a good time to be a Buccaneers fan, sort of 2000 onwards, and I ended up becoming really good friends with someone whose dad worked for Malcolm Glazier. So we ended up striking a friendship. We used to go to Florida Marlins games. I refuse to call them the other name. They're the Florida Marlins. And we used to go to watch the Lightning and the Magic and Bucks games. And then he kindly got us a ticket for the Super Bowl in San Diego and arranged transport. So we went out and watched Super Bowl 38, which was amazing.
And so you're a Buccaneer fan, correct?
I'm a Buccaneer fan. Tampa Bay Buccaneers all the way. Yes, have been stuck with them ever since the year 2000. So I've had some great times. I've had some pretty rough times. 12 years no playoffs until Tom Brady came into town. So yeah, absolutely through and through Bucks. I have my Bucks hat somewhere, but I thought I'll leave it on for now. But yeah, no, it's they're a real love of mine. You know, and it's amazing to go through what we've gone through. We're in a good period right now, winning division titles, and you know we're sort of struggling to get to the Super Bowl again, but we've got a great team, and it's definitely a really good time to be a Bucks fan these last 5 years or so. And they came over to Germany, played the first ever game in Germany. I was pleased to go there and watch that a couple of years back. So yeah, phenomenal, and hopefully they'll be back in Germany in the next year or two as well.
Any quick thoughts on what 2025 looks like for the Bucks, and you know what you're hoping to see in the team this year?
I mean, it's an exciting time. You've got a great offense there. Obviously, another offensive coordinator. So it's the 4th year in a row that we've got a new offensive coordinator. And so that's obviously really interesting. But it's an internal hire. Which is always good, and now we're getting offensive coordinators younger than myself. That's also a little bit worrying as well. But yeah, you know, with Baker Mayfield, I was very skeptical when he signed, but he's been absolutely superb. Obviously, got one of the best wide receivers ever to do it in Mike Evans, who could break into the top 20 this year, and maybe even get close to the top 15, top 10 in all-time yards. Chris Godwin, if he stays fit, and then you've added a Booker to that. You know, it's an exciting time with a great offensive line. Got Bucky Irving, one of the most exciting players to watch that offense. But they've tooled up the defense, and that was where the problem was last season. That was really what stopped this. The Achilles heel of this team was the D, because Baker was outstanding. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this team does. I do think Liam Cohen is a big loss. I was really excited when he joined. I was very upset when he left, especially the nature and the way that he left. We hope Grizz can come in and do a good job. But yeah, it's listen, when you're a small market team, and then that's what the Buccaneers are, you know, you have to accept the fact you're going to have periods where you're going to not be great. And the Buccaneers had 12 years of that from 2008 to 2020 was a very lean time. You know, they lost a lot of games, number 1 pick. You had the Jameis Winston experience. You had a lot of lows. And then all of a sudden, Tom Brady shows up, and everyone's like, "Oh, there's another team in Florida that we haven't been paying attention to." And yeah, so and he left us in great stead, not just with a Super Bowl ring, but the platform to attract great players, and that's what we've been doing. And we're in a really good spot right now as a Buccaneers fan. I don't know how long this window will continue, but even after they left, we thought, "Oh, this will be the beginning of the end." We were in cap trouble. We've come out the other side of that, still winning division titles. So, you know, with a great GM like Jason Light, who for me is the best GM in the league, with the legacy of what he's done with picks. I mean, you've got to look that since 2019, every player that he has drafted is still in the league, is a phenomenal, and on a roster is quite an exceptional feat. And no one has a record like that. So yeah, you've got to look at that and think we're set up for success, but we have to play a little bit better. The division's kind. It will get tougher. But I do think that we're set up to do something special this year. It just depends on whether we can execute.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you described the division as being kind, because that's a kind way of saying, yeah, they're in a division that doesn't have the same, you know, talent. And so again, portends well for the Bucks this year. And they are a fun team to watch. I mean, with Baker Mayfield, 3 great wide receivers, even a decent tight end, and then the running backs. They have an offense that, from a fantasy football as well as just a football fan, it's just fun to watch. And so,
Yeah.
I rattled off a lot of things you're doing in the fantasy world, but most of us have lives outside of fantasy. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do when you're not doing fantasy?
Yeah, so I work as my day job is I'm in technology sales, so I sell software for hundreds of thousands of dollars effectively. It's a stressful job, hence why the hobby is very, very important. I'm also very passionate about sport. I have a season ticket at an EPL team. So I go and watch them. And then for me, family's everything. So I've got a 5-year-old son. We spend a lot of time together, and my wife and the 3 of us just try and make time for the weekends to have lots of fun and do bits when I'm not at football, not doing fantasy, which it's just about striking a great balance in life, and learning how to do that is a tricky one. But yeah, I mean, I'm always drafting. I think I've already done 30-40 drafts this year, getting a feel for what it's going to look like in the landscape. I call it preseason. Most people just call it nuts, but for me, it's just about having it's about having that balance. I love what I do. I love my job. I love my life, my family, and it's just trying to see friends and enjoy what we've got, because if you can't enjoy it, then the time goes quickly on this planet, and you got to make the most of it. And I try and live life to its fullest and cram as much in while I can.
And that's awesome. And your positivity and your passion just exudes from you during while we're talking. So you and so you do stuff with 5-Yard Rush. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my friend Stock started 5-Yard Rush 9 years ago with a friend, and it was a podcast about their league. And that was really it. And then it sort of expanded out a little bit, but not loads. His friend got a new job and started working for himself. So I guested a few times, and he was like, well, look, why don't we do this together? And I was like, sure, why not? I was like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this, right? So I'm not shy to ask people to come on. Some of our early guests were like Marcus Grant of NFL, where he was at NFL at the time, and we had Tags came on, God rest his soul. We had Bobby as well, who was the co-host at the time, and obviously I know his name's probably not quite worth as much as it was Bobby Sylvester,
Yeah.
but and then it just sort of started from there, and then all of a sudden we started getting a bit of a following. We started getting people were like, oh wow, this UK podcast is getting guys on, and at the time there weren't tons of UK NFL podcasts, so we were able to get lots of amazing guests, and over time we built some great relationships, and frequently get the guys like Joe Dolan and Justin Boone and Joe Pisapia. They're not, and Pat Fitzmaurice. They're not just people we just grabbed. They're true friends. In fact, Joe's coming to the UK, and we're going to go do dinner. And
nice.
Bob Lung came to the UK a couple of years ago when they did the. So a couple of friends of mine started the British version of the Fantasy Football Expo. So we had our own sort of expo here for a few years, and Bob Lung came to that, and we drafted in the same SFB division together. And he's someone who's a friend, and we exchange messages on a frequent basis, and just building those relationships, because it's not just there's just these guys from England who just play fantasy football and talk about it. It's like, okay, these guys know a little bit, and it inspired us to start up the FFCC. So it inspired us to do to write the playbook. So we wrote 3 in 3 years, and then I got sick, which we'll get on to. But the 4th one's coming out, I think, in a couple of weeks. We're finished. We're just sort of putting it together on Amazon. So that's going to be exciting to drop that. But for us, when I joined, I very famously said on my podcast, the 5 Year Rush podcast, I said, I don't want to be in a world where people in the UK they have to play fantasy football. They have to play in a random NFL.com league, because 7 years ago in the UK, I don't think people knew 12 people to play in a league. I think it was literally like this case of, where do I go and play fantasy football? I don't know. I don't know enough people to fill a league. So you're trying to join the NFL community. You're trying to join some sort of group to get some form of going, but it's really tough. And so for me, it was about building a community of people that could just conduit and put together people to fill leagues. And that mission isn't finished, but that mission definitely feels a lot easier today, to see the explosion of the fantasy football community in the UK. And it's not me and Stocks at all. I could rattle off 50 guys. You've had a couple of them on in Pestel and Matt, right? So they're a couple that are driving the charge. You've got the guys at the Fantasy Sanctuary, in Rich, who used to do the Dynasty show for us at 5 Yard Rush, before going on to do the Fantasy Sanctuary. You have a lot of amazing people out there producing content. The guys at the Warrior Bowl, who I'm sure you'll get on at some point, are phenomenal in Greg and Foley, who are doing charity leagues, and more people are doing great leagues and great things. We've seen people start best ball apps because DraftKings have left the UK, and we're seeing this great explosion now of a true sense of a community. Like, if you'd asked me, we have a live draft for the Scott Fish Bowl in London. If you had told me 8 years ago we'd have a fantasy football expo, a live draft for the Scott Fish Bowl in London, and I would know 80 to 100 plus people from England playing in the Scott Fish Bowl every year, I'd have said you were crazy. I just didn't think it would happen. But here we are, and people spouting great leagues and great charity leagues. And, you have guys like Johnny who do like the Orkney Bowl, which is a great charity league and a great competition. You have guys like Simo, Simo's amazing, right? Simo started a league called the British Fantasy Football League, right? And it started with 16 people, right, in the UK to play fantasy football. That league now has relegations and promotions, and it now has, I'm going to get the number wrong, so Simo's going to give me a slap on the wrist, but I believe it's somewhere between, it's either 212 or 216 people, and it's grown from just the British to there's US divisions and an international division and a European division. And that's the best thing about fantasy football, right? It's putting the money and raising the money and all of that is a phenomenal thing through putting together, but the passion and just the ability to just meet people. I've met some phenomenal people just from drafting in the Scott Fish Bowl and drafting in divisions with people I don't know. You get into a chat and then you find that all these people, you have a common love of something, but then actually you find a lot more commonality. So there's really, the UK community is just phenomenal in terms of the people. I've got lifelong friends who I've made from the community just in the UK, but also internationally. And that was really, it's not why we started a podcast, but the great benefit of it is the amount of people I get to meet and talk to, and really sort of, we get to the point now where there's so much knowledge and so much love of the game. And I think in the UK, you've got to be a real fan you got to really love the game. Games are on at 1 a.m.
Weird hours and
exactly that,
different
right?
channels over the internet.
Yeah, it can be tough. I mean, we've got Game Pass here, which helps. So for me, I watch a lot of games in 40 to watch every game and do the analysis and look at the tape. But the things now, we've got a doubling NFL game, we've got the doubling college game. I'd love to see the college game grow even more. I felt like we were getting somewhere, and then ESPN took ESPN Player away. But yeah, the NFL's strong here, and it really is the fastest growing sport in Europe, and you're seeing that with Germany, Madrid getting a game this year. That's been talked about for a few years. Ireland and Dublin getting a game. How many more European cities are going to get games in the coming years? So I imagine there'll be quite a few. So there's a strong love for the NFL, not just in the UK, but all over Europe. And it's just great to be part of that and part of that movement, and just even like the tiniest. I mean, we are the tiniest little morsel of that, but it's great. It's great to be there.
What I love seeing about that is, one, it makes the world smaller. It brings us all closer together. We get to engage with each other doing something we all love. And we find out that there's way more similarities than there are differences. And, I'm in plenty of leagues. I'm in Matt's league. So, shout out to Matt. But we, in the past, there might have been one player who was based in the UK, and then you always worried about, well, how's that going to time in terms of the draft? It's like, is there going to be a long lag, and we have to send our trade requests over, and and anticipate the fact that they may be asleep when I'm inspired with the trade. But no, I mean, it's, again, we're all doing things. We're all interconnected, and love the fact that there's more. I mean, for example, you mentioned the Scott Fish Bowl in London. I love that. I mean, I love the fact that there's an opportunity for people that have a shared interest to get together. And sure, they're going to be drafting and maybe even razzing each other a little bit about who they picked, but it's also a great opportunity to get together and share stories and just see each other. I'm coordinating the Houston live draft for the Scott Fish Bowl. I was a participant in last year's, and we actually did an unofficial one a couple of years ago where we just said, gee, it would be nice if we all got together and met at a local brewery and do at least a couple of rounds of the draft while we're all in the same room. So getting a chance just to kind of meet each other. You mentioned the expo. I'll be going to my first expo.
I'm jealous.
August.
Bob has been asking me to go for about 6 or 7 years, and it's just with school holidays. It's always around my son's birthday. It's just really difficult. I will do it at some point. I don't know when it will be, but I'm in the King's Classic. So for me, I'm desperate to do it. I mean, I'm very fortunate enough. The King's Classic, for those that are watching and don't know what that is, it kind of stemmed out of the start of the Expo, where they were divisions of fantasy experts who were drafting in the Hall of Fame the day after the Expo. And that was kind of how it stemmed from there. Was you did the expo, and then the next day you would do the live draft, and then it started getting picked up by Sirius XM, and then Bob came to me, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even longer than that now. Time goes so quickly, man. I can't remember. And he said, look, I've got this idea. First of all, I want to bring you into the King's Classic, which was just amazing, to draft with some of the best in the world and play in a league. To be invited and be considered that is first of all amazing. But he was like, how do we can you help me find international? So the Dawson division of the King's Classic is half American, half international. So it's great. So there's draft.
It's a Ryder's Cup of fantasy football.
It is. It's like a President's Cup of fantasy football. So my good buddy Kurt Howley's in it. He now lives in the US. Does Kurt? But he was he's from South Africa. My good buddy Peter from Germany is in it. It's phenomenal. And Peter hosted his own charity league for many years as well, and holds some amazing leagues. Kurt was a former runner-up of the Scott Fish Bowl. So I mean, we're talking about there's a lot of real talented players all over the world. So yeah, I mean, for me, to go and draft in the Hall of Fame is to get that opportunity one day. It's a bucket list thing that I'm desperate to do with the Expo. So I'm going to do it. I don't know when. but I will. I will do it at some point in the next few years for sure.
Well, and I think you also, obviously you do on the content side, and you're really very involved on the content side. What first got you into getting to fantasy football content?
We started the podcast, and it was just amazing, the response. And I realized that I can't speak for Stocks, but I'll speak for me. And Stocks is my co-host, by the way. When I say Stocks, Stocks doesn't like the online kind of presence, so he does the hosting, and he's basically becomes kind of like the guy who pushes me, right? So I kind of realized I saw the game very different, and I love the strategy side. And I was like, all of a sudden, it's I don't want to be told who to pick, right? I don't want to be told who to pick. I want to learn how to pick. It's that old-fashioned saying of, teach a man to fish, and he will feed for a lifetime. Give a man 2 fish, he's going to be hungry in a few days, or however the saying goes. And I believe in that. And for me, I kind of see the content that I do and that we do, and I've written about for years on Fantasy Pros and other sites that have been kind enough to have me over the years. I kind of see it as a way of leveling up your gamesmanship. How do you get better at the game itself? The strategic pieces, how to look at roster construction, how to build an optimal roster, how to rotate your bench, how to freshen up free agency. When do you bring in a load of running backs versus when do you ship them out and go for wide receiver pieces or depth pieces? How do you manage your bye weeks? How many players to take on certain bye weeks? And thinking of the strategy inside of the strategy kind of thing, the pathways to victory. And teaching folks on the same path of the stats that matter. One of the chapters in the fantasy football playbook this year is a whole chapter on just stats that matter. And it's like, because people hear about, all these stats on all these podcasts, and there's so many great outlets, but no one knows where to find them. And then actually you'll be surprised to know that 90% of what you need to be great at fantasy football, you can get for free. You don't have to buy. It's only those sort of level up pieces that you're playing in big money leagues that you need to pay tools for. So it's teaching people about that, why the stats matter, where you find them, what you're looking for, where do you get your edge, where's that edge. And I've always kind of seen the game a bit differently. I sort of see things that others don't, and see different pathways, and try and teach people what I'm looking for. And I'm wrong a lot of the time, and I'm right a good amount of the time, but I'm always a risky player. I'm trying to find the definitive edge that gets me a title. And then it started leading me to find crazy formats. And so I'm kind of the person who tries and breaks fantasy football. If you ever want to play some of the most ridiculous formats of fantasy football going, I'm your man. Like, drop me a message. My handles here on the chat. I mean, I have leagues. One league I've got several sort of dynasty rules mania leagues, I call them, which are single-handedly the biggest headache but the most fun have, which is basically there's 2 drafts every year. There's a rules draft where you can change one rule or one scoring position or one roster piece. And then everyone gets to pick one, but you've got to keep rules for 2 years before you can start vetoing rules out. And then you do a rookie draft. So some of the rules that come up are you can't draft players in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft with your first pick, and then it makes trading really active. Or you'll add a rule like tight ends score 3 times the reception bonus of wide receivers. So if anyone plays the wide receiver card upwards, then the tight ends get boosted. And it's just like, you can have a really bad team, create a rule, and you can turn your bad team into a championship team the next year. And
it sounds so fun.
it's ridiculous. And there's a lot of times I have to veto some rules. Some of the rules that become harder to enforce, there is some where it's like, if a player is arrested in the NFL, they have to be dropped to waivers. Now, that doesn't mean charged. That's just arrested. So when Tyreek Hill, when Tyreek Hill was arrested last year, even though he was released and got to play the game, he was technically arrested. He was in handcuffs.
Yeah.
So he got released.
I love that rule. In fact, I'd probably use that rule as just my own personal. Gee, if a player I don't like, I don't draft. And
Yeah.
some people will say, well, why did you skip over that player? He's like one of the top 5 or top 10 wide receivers. And I go, well, it's just because I gotta like the players on my team. And it sounds dumb because they're just names on a board. It's not like I personally know them, but I do also have to enjoy. To me, having fun is above winning and losing.
Yeah, a little bit. I would also say I was caught very famously on one of our first episodes saying that I'd trade my mother for a championship. So, which I think got made into a T-shirt at some point. I agree with you. For me, fun is the most important aspect of it, right? And it's just like, regardless of any advice or lack of advice or whatever, right? It's your team, you own it. Don't blame the analysts for making a bad pick. It's your team, you own it. But also just have fun. Like, if you want to just pick a load of players that might not do well and you're going to have fun doing it, then go for it. Like, at the end of the day, it's about your enjoyment, and that's kind of what matters. But I think
I don't know if you can see the hat behind
it.
It's right there. It's a Houston Texans hat. And so, of course, Deshaun Watson was our quarterback for a while. And then, he sat out a year, and we sat him out a year. And I think he finally, became Cleveland's problem. But, it's funny that people come to me and, try to, well, not anymore, but, when he was still going to be the starter for Cleveland, they would try to trade me, and I'd say, no, that's okay.
It's fine.
Well, I did, and again, I'd love to talk fantasy football all day long, but I really want to be able to start talking more about what led you to the Fantasy Football Challenge Cup and the charity it supports. So why don't you just give us a quick intro and overview of what the Fantasy Football Challenge Cup is?
Sure. So, inspired by Scott Fish, my first Scott Fish Bowl was Scott Fish Bowl 8. Love and appreciate all the work that Scott and Ryan and the whole team there, Russ, and I mean, they've got so many people now, Bob and John and Sal. I mean, like, we can just keep going, right? There's so many people. We'll stop naming people. I was like, right, we in the UK, we need a charity tournament, and I've always been big at giving back in my life. I'm very fortunate. I think anyone that gets to play fantasy football as a hobby and does it to the level that we do, we're pretty lucky in life. If we compare ourselves to other people all over the world, that we have these great opportunities to give something back to those that are less fortunate. And so, I've been a big believer in that. So we started 7 years ago, the Fantasy Football Challenge Cup. Now, it was a bit of a homage for those of you that like soccer or the real football, whatever you want to call it. It's a homage to an English cup here called the FA Cup, which is the Football Association Challenge Cup. Now, the beautiful thing about the Challenge Cup, the FA Cup, is it's a straight knockout competition. It's not bracketed, it's drawn sort of every round, but I knew to Americans that would be weird and the admin, so I did it as a bracket. But effectively, what separates the FFCC from any other charity tournament is it's straight knockout from the word go. So there's no league season playing for playoffs and postseason. And for me, the great thing about the FA Cup was this idea of a what we call a giant killing, what you'd call over there a Cinderella story. I really loved the idea of John sitting on his sofa, who's played fantasy football for 2 years, knocking off someone like Tags or Joe Pisapia or someone like that. I loved that idea of just that Cinderella story, that giant killing of like John, who knows nothing about football, beating someone like that in a heads up match. So that was really where it all kind of came from. So it was for the first 5 years, it was a 256 person tournament, and we capped it because you have to make the numbers work. And so what it was it's a 2-week matchup. So you combine the scores from week 1, the score from week 2, and it's best ball. So that, you know, for these charity tournaments, like everyone else, you know, best ball is kind of an easy way of doing it. You draft it, you set it, forget it, right? So we've made the scoring different every single year. There's always something nuanced and a bit different about it. But effectively, where it originally started was 2-week matchup, combined score, you move along, and then you move through the rounds. A couple of years ago, I started something called the Intercontinental Plate. Now, Brian Drake, I'm sure you might be familiar, quite a lot of people on here might be familiar, was the inaugural winner. So I felt bad that people would pay or donate money, would be out by week 2. So it was a way of kind of extending play. So what I did for year 5 was the 128 that were eliminated in week 2 fell into a secondary tournament, which was the plate, and then that became a bracket. So effectively, Brian lost in his first matchup, then swept the table, and he took home the Intercontinental Plate.
Very nice.
So not quite as good as the main event, but still pretty special. And then last year, I decided to just go crazy. And then I've kept it. So what I did is introduce, I thought, I'm tired of capping this at 256. Let's just get as many people as we can. So we had close to 350 people last year. And it's like, well, how do the numbers work? So we had a 1-week cut line where the top 256 made it into the main event. And everyone below that fell into what I created was Squid Game. Now, I've already mentioned I like to break fantasy football. The Squid Game is very much like the television show. The difference is I spin a wheel, I drop it in the chat, and it'll be a prompt. So it'll be like your wide receiver 2 has to score 20 points this week or you're eliminated.
Oh, this sounds so fun.
So it's random. And also because it's best ball, you have no
control over it.
You've got no control. You just have to sit there at the mercy of it. And it's literally, you could be the lowest scoring team in the entire that's left in the Squid Game, but you could hit the prompt and you move through. So you could have your team could score 100 points, but if your wide receivers 2 score 20 points, you're through. Whereas a team could score 268, but didn't score it with the wide receiver 2, and they're eliminated. And it's just the randomness of it. It was crazy. So the Squid Game was born. So and some people were like, I just want to get into the Squid Game, Squid main event. But the problem is with that is genuinely, you don't know when that will end, because you could either lose most people quite quickly. So I kind of had to manage the numbers. And then eventually what happened is by week 12, we ended up with 2 people. So I made it like a penalty shootout. So it was basically like for the next 5 weeks to week 17, spin a prompt, and you either hit it or you miss it, like a penalty shootout, and the one who got the most won. And I think it was decided after 4 weeks, but that was Squid Game. So if you went out in week 1, you went into Squid Game. And if you went out in round 2, which was week 3 or week 4, you'd go into the plate, and then you had the main event. So we ended up, it's now 3 competitions. It's definitely the hardest competition, I think, out there, because with the scoring, with the strategy involved, and the fact it's best ball and you can draw anybody, it's not about scoring the most points, it's about beating your opponent. So previous winners have started really slowly, but just squeaked through, and then peaked at the right time. Other teams, I've seen teams dominate really early, and then you got to get your bye weeks scheduled, because if you type too many players on the same bye week, it's instant elimination. Like, it's really, there's a lot of strategy. And then to break it even more, I made it arguably very balanced for all positions. So it's a tight end premium, it's a super flex, it's a start 2 kicker with old SFB 13
kickers. Great.
So you got start 2 kickers. On last year's scoring, Brandon Aubrey was the overall number 2 player behind Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I could see that easily. He had a great kicking season, and all of a sudden he's your advantage player. Sure.
So you had So some of the drafts last year, you had kickers coming off the board in round 5. You had teams drafting 5 kickers because they just didn't know the path to victory. So it's really difficult to kind of get a feeling for what is right, because it is a pick your own adventure. This year is a little different. The premium on tight ends, they were falling a little short, so I bumped that up to 1.25. I've tweaked the quarterback scoring a little bit, so it has a completion and incompletion marks on that. And then I've also put in there receiving bonuses, so tight ends get a 1.25 receiving bonus. The kicking is still 2 kickers, and it's strong. So you can't punt the kicker position. You need to go and get a kicker. You need to get one quite quickly, but you've got to try and find your balance across all the other positions. You can't really neglect a position. So it is a very challenging league.
Nice. I love it.
I've not seen anybody come close to defending a title. I think probably one of the historically best players is our inaugural winner, Jack Humphrey from the UK. So I think he's made the last 16 twice, which is pretty unheard of. We get some big names. Andy Singleton has won it as the only sort of what we call mainstream analyst to have taken the title, and the only was he the only US? No, I think we've had 2 US winners. So it is a mixed bag. You get a Scott Fish Bowl place for winning it. Then you also get to join the 5-yard rush champion of champions.
Oh wow!
Which is a pretty unique thing, because effectively the champion of champions is the list. We do a load of different leagues. We do an auction league. We do a Titan Premium League. We do a Vampire League. We do all sorts of leagues. So the winners of all the leagues come into a champion of champions every year that we do. So it's only most of the time it's champions, although sometimes there has to be like a runner-up in there to make up the spots. And then we do crazy rules in there every year. So we change the format of that. So
trying to think a couple of quick questions that people who are watching might have, especially if they haven't been in the league yet.
Sure.
First of all, you mentioned that you're not with the hard cap on top, so people can be applying and signing up and applying, or hoping to win a position or a place on in the league, and you're encouraging as many people as possible.
If you donate, you're in. It's that simple. If you donate anything, you're in. There's none of this like waiting list or anything like that. If you donate at all, you're in. Obviously, we'll give away spots to people as well. You don't necessarily have to donate, but if you do donate, you are 100% in. That's kind of what we say. And
you're running this on Sleeper, or
we run it on Sleeper. So yeah, it's 12-team divisions, and then effectively I share a bracket. So I use Challenge, which is a bracket piece of kit on the website, and I share that round along with. I update the scores in an Excel spreadsheet. So,
and since this is a pretty complex league, do you have people helping you to run this and to organize this and to do the scoring and all that? You're doing it all yourself?
I did the whole thing, man.
Wow.
So I literally September's pretty tough. Once the numbers dwindle, it gets a lot easier. So now we basically do a 4-hour timer in round 1. So if you time out, you're out. It's that simple. And I have a few people every year who are kind enough to basically just join last minute to fill in. And then we and then basically once you do that, if you time out, it's fine, as long as you just have to know people are there, basically. And then it's down to you. It's your team. If you time out, that's on you. It's your draft, right? You own the draft. I just need to know round 1 you're going to be there. So then you have complete control of what you do. It's 25 rounds, so it's deep, 12-team leagues. So you get to know them. I try and put a big analyst in each division where possible. So you get to draft with someone cool in most cases. Unless you're stuck with me, in which case that could be a bit boring.
Can I ask for somebody? And then
you can try. I mean, the way I always say it is, if the donation's high enough, we'll do anything, right? But
And is
no,
there a minimum donation, or is this just what people
we
feel
sort of
like
say to
they're
people like
compelled to give?
yeah, the suggested donation is £10 or $15 is kind of what we suggest. But it, really it's what you can afford. We do giveaways that are only based on the minimum donation, so or the suggested donation. So if, for example, you donate $5 and you'll get a spot, but you won't be eligible for the giveaways that we'll do, which we will hold those to the people who make the suggested donation, because effectively the donations come out of my pocket. I put on top of what I donate to the charity every year, I put aside a few $100s, if not more, of prizes every year. They're normally signed bits of swag. So, like, for me, it's want to raise as much money for Crohn's and Colitis UK, who have been phenomenal for my family. We haven't talked about them, but I was diagnosed
good
with.
to bring them in and
Yeah,
highlight what you're doing in this for. So, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your story as well as what the charity's involved in.
So the first 5 years of the FFCC, we picked charities that affected people that we knew that were really close to us, and we did a different, really small charity every year. So we've raised money for really, really small charities that no one has really heard of. And then in January 2023, I was diagnosed with a severe case of ulcerative colitis. Now, colitis is very similar to Crohn's disease. There are several. In fact, you would have seen that. I believe Hunter Renfro was just re-signed back in the league.
Yes,
and he left the league because of ulcerative colitis. So if
I
you read this,
didn't know why. I thought it was an injury.
No, so he had ulcerative colitis, and one of the things with ulcerative colitis affects your large bowel, or your large intestines, your large bowel. Your Crohn's affects your small bowel, but also your mouth, digestion, and then your tract all the way down here. So he had ulcerative colitis, which is what I have, which affects the lower part of your intestines. So when you're in a severe flare, you and I won't get too graphic, but you'll pass a lot of blood, and you'll lose a lot of weight. So I lost 10 stone when I was in flare. I was in hospital in and out for about 5 months. And until you find a treatment plan that kind of works for you, or you have your bowel removed and you have what's called a stoma bag or colostomy bag, you would see a few different people that have different types of bags. And that's effectively where they remove the bowel, and then there's a little bit that's hanging out, and then you basically go to the toilet in your bag. It affects multiple millions of people all over the world. Yesterday, actually, was World IBD Day. So it's a perfect time to be talking about this, because it's actually a disease that is very, very prominent, but probably one that most people aren't aware of. And so why we picked them is the without the charity, I would never have been diagnosed. Without the charity, I wouldn't have had the strength to advocate for myself and my family, to advocate for me when I wasn't well enough to advocate for myself in hospital. And it is a really difficult disease. Now, I'm 2 years in remission, and I never thought I would get here. Like, I really thought I was 24 hours, 48 hours away from having surgery. And they decided to give me one last try with a tablet that was fairly new from the United States. And I was a bit of a test case for it, and it's worked out brilliantly for me. But I will probably have my bowel removed before I'm 50. That's probably the likely path of where we're going, and I've made peace with that. But it's a disease that really it's unforgiving, and it's relentless. And yeah, Hunter Renfro had to take a year out. He retired because he lost all his muscle. He lost a lot of weight, couldn't maintain it, and that's what's really, really difficult with a disease like this. Is it's just very, very difficult. So I think, and Matt Light, former Super Bowl winner, again, he nearly retired in the early 2000s for a very, very similar thing, because he got hospitalized with it, and yeah, literally, I think it was after a game, and he couldn't keep weight on. So yeah, tricky thing. And so yeah, we're just trying to raise awareness for this disease, and my only thing while I've got this platform is, if you start to see some blood and you pass blood, go and see a doctor immediately and go and get tested. And test is a camera. It's not pleasant. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but please do. My doctors missed it for 5 years.
Wow.
So I had it for 5 years, that if I had treatment plans in place, I would not have had to have gone through 5, nearly 6 months in hospital. And I was at my lowest point of my life there, and away from my kid, who was 3, who didn't know what was going on. So yeah, that's why we do it. We've raised to date pretty close to £15,000, nearly $20,000 for them. Overall, since we've been doing this, we've raised over $52,000 for multiple charities. So we want as much money in for this amazing organization, but also just we just want as many people to play. It's a really challenging format. It's difficult, but you don't have to set a lineup, so you can have some fun with it. And I promise you that, 1, you'll never play in a league like it. But 2, the people in it are absolutely awesome and they're phenomenal, and you'll have a great time chatting with people and following the tournament through and seeing it develop. And you know, again, you can fall into the Squid Game, which is just nuts and a great deal of fun. You could be in the Intercontinental Plate, and we give out pretty cool prizes as well. So there's lots of cool stuff in there. So yeah, please do get involved. It would be amazing to have you. If you look at our pin tweet on at 5 Yard Rush on X, you can just fill in the form, donate there, and yeah, it'd be an absolute honor. If you're not sure on anything, then please do message me. You can DM me. You can get me on pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, and for
like
those watching, in the YouTube show note or description, there will be information on how also you can contact Murf. There'll be a link to the website for the Colitis and Crohn's and Colitis UK website, and certainly you can also contact me at this Twitter account, and I can connect you to Murf or provide you with whatever information. It's super inspiring to hear your story, and you know, and I think as we were talking earlier, it's so inspiring when someone has a very personal connection to the charity that they're supporting, and it really does come through. And hopefully, we'll be able to encourage people to join your league, and also raise awareness to how important this health issue is, and you know, what they can look for. So I appreciate you sharing your story about that.
Absolutely. And I'll say one more thing about ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, and then I'll stop talking about the disease. This disease doesn't discriminate against anybody, and the most likely people to get it are 25 to 39-year-old males.
Wow. Yeah, where you're thinking you're invincible, you're bulletproof.
Exactly that. Look at Hunter Renfro. Hunter Renfro is as fit as can be, NFL player. He gets it, but also it's not there to stop you. Like you can beat this. You can go back to leading a normal life, and manage this condition. But the earlier you get it under control. So I know men are not supposed to talk about health and all these sorts of things, right? But ultimately, you got to just give up the fragility of it. Go get yourself checked, and please do. And if you think you have anything wrong with your digestive system, please, and it's just, even if it's a case of going too much, please get it checked. Honestly, like I can't stress this enough, that early detection will just mean you can get it under control quicker. Like I said, mine was missed for 5 years, and I was 24 hours away from having life-changing surgery, and I will need to have that surgery at some point. I'm pretty lucky that I've got an amazing team, but the sooner you get it under control, I know people who got early detection and they're not even on medication now. They can manage this with just diet. So it's
I was
really
going to ask, I mean, like, for example, eating more, healthy foods, and, avoiding certain foods that could aggravate it more.
It's different per person. Alcohol's a big factor, so I'm teetotal now, and have been for a few years as a result of this. Actually, for me, what led to me getting into remission was eating unhealthy food. That it sounds so counterintuitive, but if you think about it, it makes sense. So fiber, if you obviously the more fiber you have, fiber is designed to make your digestion work and for you to go to the toilet. Nuts, seeds are supposed to agitate the bowel to get all those bits of stool out and pass it right. I didn't need my bowel to work any harder. In fact, it needed to be very, very lazy so it could recover. It was almost like it needed to be on the shelf.
Sure.
So I had to eat not well. No straw, no seeds, no nuts, no whole like brown rice or quinoa or certain grains, no spicy food, no alcohol. But pizza was fine. So now I'm in remission. Now I'm in a training environment to lose the weight that I have put on because I've had to eat pretty poorly in the last 2 years, but it worked. And it's
Yes.
it's so counterintuitive, but it's different for different people. I've got friends who can eat peanuts and eat nuts, and
Wow.
I got popcorn's the worst thing because of the kernels.
Yes.
Yes. But so, diet is pretty difficult. But now my diet is oatmeal and oatmeal, chicken, rice, vegetables, and boiling those vegetables to an inch of their lives. And yogurt. That's pretty much all I live on now. But
yeah, my doctor has prescribed me to go on to what he refers to as the Mediterranean diet, which is much less red meat. And as someone in Texas, I'm always tempted by steaks and red meat, and more things like high fiber, healthier eating, less alcohol, more water. I'm trying, but
it's hard, man. But it's honestly like I know so much, and if you think like you might have symptoms of going frequently, loose blood, anything like that, and you just think even before you want to talk to a doctor and you just want to speak to someone, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about this disease. Or do you know what? If you are suffering with this disease and you don't know anyone else that has it, do you know what's really funny? I talk about this is every year in the UK I do a rookie league. Right. So there's a big NFL UK Facebook group, and I send a message out saying, if you never play fantasy football, get in touch. I'm going to run a league and I'll basically coach you. I'll tell you how to do it. I'll give you copies of my books that I've written if you want to get into it. But basically it's a safe space, right? I'll stop you from making really silly mistakes. I'll coach you through it. And then you can go off and go and play with other people, right? Or the league stays together. We did this last year. Now I've made some great friends doing these leagues. I've seen people go on to be industry analysts from being in part of these leagues because they just get the bug and they're so excited. Last year we did a league and then someone dropped out last minute. So I said, I'll play. I got to know these people. They set up a WhatsApp group. I joined. 4 of us have Crohn's or colitis out of the 12. Didn't know any of these people, by the way. Before the league started, never heard of them. Just put in a forum, and it goes to show. But also, it just shows you the power of people, right?
And the power of community.
And the power of community. That's exactly it.
Getting together and finding out you have more things in common. Hopefully, more good things in common, but also some challenges that we all tend to face. And really, that was kind of like the idea behind trying to run this podcast, is to try to raise awareness, bring us all together, and hopefully through the combining of all of our good spirits and our support of each other, that we can actually affect change in a positive way. And
we really can, can't we? Because like many hands make light work, and so the more people that get involved and the more people that join in. And do you know what, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, do you know what, I wish I did something for my community, my local town, do a charity league, go collect some money from the fees that you collect for your league, whatever it is, right? You don't have to be an industry specialist. You don't have to be a knowledgeable person. You don't have to be, the guys you've had on here, Pestle, myself, Matt, we're nobody's really, like, none of us are, you know, Matt doesn't have a podcast. Matt doesn't have a show. He's not trying to be a fantasy guru or an influencer. He's just a guy who was like touched by a charity, saw some people running charity leagues and goes, I'm pretty good at organizing and doing spreadsheets. So I'm just going to give it a crack. Like, it's the power of just doing. And we're in a society with technology now that there is no barrier to doing it. Right. If you're thinking about starting a charity league or you want to just get some ideas, drop me a DM. I'll help you get started. I'll give you some advice, whatever it is, and we'll point you to people in the US. I know with Scott and a lot of the guys who do charity leagues, like the Battle of the Sexes crew, and a lot of the crew that do things through registered through Fantasy Cares now. The fact that you can register your charity through Fantasy Cares, they'll do the heavy lifting for you in terms of donation page and where that money goes. So, but if you want to do something local just to you, like, come talk to me. We'll help you and tell you what the right ways to do it and things like that. But honestly, just do it. Even if you raise $100, that's $100 that charity doesn't have right now. And through COVID and speaking to charities like I do, a lot of these were really impacted and struggling even now with fundraising. So if you're just listening to this thinking like, well, this redheaded idiot from the UK has got a fantasy league and he's raised some money, so surely I can do it, then do it. Because honestly, if whatever you raise, you don't need to set a lofty goal. You don't need to go big, you know, $50, $100, whatever you do, that's more than what they've got, and they'll really appreciate it. And you'd have made a positive impact. And if you've been blessed in your life to not have too many challenges, you know, give something back.
Awesome. And you've been such a blessing to come on to our show and to share your story and also share, you know, the story around the Fantasy Football Challenge Cup. Can you remind folks how they can either get a hold of you or find out more information about the FFCC and the charity itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can get in touch with me on X at 5 Yard Rush, Blue Sky, I'm Murf NFL.bsky.social. If you've got Elon Musk issues, I call it Elon Musk playground as X, but yeah, I'm available on both. If not, Rick has my email. So if you're not on those platforms, but you can get in touch with Rick or the show, message Rick or message anyone, Iggy. You know, those guys have my email. They can I'm happy for them to pass it out. And you can drop me an email. I'm not going to announce it on here, but
Sure.
if you get in touch with Rick, I'm more than happy for my email to get passed along for sure. And yeah, you know, in terms of the podcast 5 Yard Rush, we do a lot of talk on there. You can find that on all good play, all podcast apps, YouTube, etc. We are coming up on 1,000 episodes, which is mind-boggling in its own right. And we'll do something special for that. But I will also do, if you're one of these people like me who has to play in every single charity league, come the start of the charity league seasons, I will be doing shows on how to win all of these particular charity leagues, and I will be giving away projection sheets for all of them and all those sorts of things. We will also be doing a fantasy football playbook I talked about. That's going to go live in a couple of weeks, so find a way to connect with me. If you buy a copy of that as part of the toolkit, there'll be part of that, and it's not that much. We haven't set a price, but it's not going to be more than $15 at most. You will actually have access to my projections with an ability to set custom league settings. So for all these hinky leagues, all these funny leagues that you play in, you'll be able to set the scoring setting for any league, and you'll be able to do that with my projections, and you'll be able to get an idea on who to draft and how the scoring works. So, and plus there's a lot of really interesting tips in the playbook around injuries and strategy. It's very different. I don't tell you who to draft. I've even got my own streaming metric, which I've been doing for 6 years now. So there's a load of different stuff in there. It's different to any other book out there. And I'm not just saying that. It is very different. And if you don't believe me, I'll give you a copy of one of the first books that I wrote to try out. And if you like some of the stuff in there, I promise you this one's even better.
Awesome. And again, Murph, I really do appreciate you coming on the show and spending time with us, sharing your story, sharing the information about the leagues and all the other work that you're doing, and most important, the work you're doing for the Crohn's and Colitis UK. And other folks that are out in the audience, if you are running a charity league or charity event and you'd like to be a guest on a future Give Back show, please reach out to me. Again, my Twitter account is right about there. And happy and would love to be able to bring you on and let you spend time on the show talking about what you're doing and trying to raise awareness. So next Tuesday night, my guest is going to be another special guest. It's Iggy, who is the co-founder of the Sports Affiliation, and he runs the his FF7 charity
FF7s.
league. And so we're going to be talking about that on next Tuesday's show.
You're blessed. You're in
And
for a real one. He's an awesome guy, and
he is
I've known Iggy for 6 years, and he's a phenomenal guy.
awesome, super smart, and also just the best person. So,
Yeah.
So in the meantime, thanks again for watching. Do remember to be good, do good, and always look for an opportunity to give back. Thanks again.